My brother unleashed police on my son over a fake theft, while my parents watched in silence. Then I exposed the lie and obliterated careers that shielded him. All right, my brother called the cops on my 10-year-old son, claiming he stole a $15,000 Rolex. My parents backed him up. Police took my kid away in handcuffs while I was saving someone's life at the hospital. When I found out what really happened, I made sure everyone involved paid for it. Here's the whole story. I'm Carter, 40 male, cardiologist at a major hospital in California. Decent job, decent house in the suburbs, wife Rachel and 2 kids, Dylan, who was 10 at the time, and Sophie, who was 6. We live pretty quiet lives. I work long hours at the hospital, come home, help with homework. Weekends are for family time, nothing fancy, just solid, middle-class existence, doing what I love, and making good money doing it. The path to becoming a cardiologist wasn't easy. 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of med school, 3 years of internal medicine residency, then another 3 years of cardiology fellowship. By the time I was done with training, I was 32 years old with massive student debt and just starting to build my career, but I loved the work. The precision required, the direct impact on patient survival, the satisfaction of fixing something as complex as the human heart. Now at 40, I've been an attending cardiologist for 8 years. I specialize in interventional procedures, the kind where you thread catheters through arteries, place stents, occasionally crack a chest open when things go really wrong. It's high-pressure work that requires steady hands and clear thinking under stress. Lives depend on you making the right call in critical moments. That responsibility never gets lighter, but you learn to carry it. My hospital salary is solid, around $380,000 annually, plus bonuses for being on call and handling emergency procedures. Rachel and I bought our house 5 years ago, a 4-bedroom place in a quiet neighborhood with good schools. Nothing extravagant, but comfortable. We're not flashy people. Rachel works part-time as a school nurse, mostly because she likes having her own career and contributing, not because we need the money. We save, we invest, we live below our means. Financial stability matters to both of us. The medical field isn't for everyone. The hours are brutal, the stress is constant, and you're literally holding people's lives in your hands. But there's something deeply satisfying about fixing a failing heart, about sending someone home to their family when they arrived at death's door. That satisfaction is what keeps me going through the 60-hour weeks and emergency calls at 3 a.m. My parents live about 20 miles away in this big Spanish-style house they bought back in the 90s. The place sits on about half an acre, with this massive backyard that's basically a park. They've got a patio with a built-in grill, a fire pit, even a small vegetable garden my mom tends to obsessively. The backyard was always the main draw for family gatherings, plenty of space for kids to run wild while adults talked inside. We still saw them most weekends because family matters, or at least I thought it did back then. Sunday lunches were tradition. My mom would cook these elaborate meals. My dad would grill if the weather was good, and we'd all sit around their dining table like some kind of Norman Rockwell painting. Dylan loved going there, would ask all week when we'd visit Grandma and Grandpa again. Sophie was always quieter about it, more reserved. But I figured that was just her personality. She's naturally introverted. Or so I thought. My dad's retired now. Spent 35 years as an electrical engineer before hanging it up 5 years ago. Solid career, good retirement package, owns the house outright. He's the practical type. Fixes things himself, has opinions about politics and sports, pretty standard boomer dad. My mom was a stay-at-home parent when Blake and I were growing up, then went back to work part-time doing administrative stuff at a local community college. She retired 3 years ago and now fills her time with gardening, book club, and being overly involved in everyone's business. Then there's my brother Blake, 4 years older than me, hotshot attorney with his own law firm. Guy's made a name for himself. In California legal circles, the kind of connections where he knows judges, prosecutors, half the police department on a first-name basis. He loves reminding everyone about it too. Can't have a family dinner without Blake dropping some story about winning a case or networking with someone important. Blake started his own practice about 10 years ago. After spending 5 years at a mid-size firm, building his reputation and client list, he focuses on criminal defense, primarily white-collar stuff, embezzlement, fraud, tax evasion, the kind of cases where clients can afford to pay premium rates. His firm grew to about 8 employees, 3 other attorneys, 2 paralegals, and support staff. He was pulling in somewhere north of $500,000 a year, maybe more. He never gave exact numbers, but loved dropping hints about his success. The guy drove a Tesla, wore Rolex watches. Yeah, the irony. Lived in a mech mansion in one of those gated communities where the HOA fines you if your grass is half an inch too long. His wife, Nicole, came from money. Her dad owned a chain of car dealerships across Southern California. They sent their son Austin to private school, took European vacations every summer, basically lived the lifestyle Blake thought proved he'd made it. And Blake never let anyone forget it. Every family gathering turned into his personal highlight reel, stories about his latest high-profile case, name-dropping judges he played golf with, mentioning which prosecutor owed him a favor. My mom ate it up, constantly talking about my successful attorney's son to anyone who'd listen. My dad was more subtle, but clearly proud of Blake's achievements. Blake and I have never been close. He's always had this superiority thing going, constantly trying to one-up me or make subtle digs about my career versus his. Must be nice working for someone else, he'd say about my hospital job, conveniently ignoring that I'm a specialist making excellent money, while he's drowning in business overhead and client acquisition costs. When are you going to start your own practice? He'd ask, like working at a major hospital was somehow settling. The competition between us went back to childhood. Blake was the firstborn, the golden child, the one who got into the best college and then law school. I was the younger brother who chose medicine, which my parents supported but never celebrated quite the same way. When Blake passed the bar, my parents threw him a huge party, invited half the neighborhood. When I finished my cardiology fellowship, we had a family dinner. That pretty much sums up the dynamic. What really grated on me was how Blake treated Rachel and the kids. He'd make these condescending comments about Rachel working part-time, suggesting she was wasting her education by not pursuing a full-time career. Never mind that Rachel made a deliberate choice to have more flexibility for our family. Blake couldn't understand anything that didn't fit his definition of success: maximum income, maximum prestige, maximum everything. With Dylan and Sophie, Blake was dismissive at best. He'd compare them unfavorably to Austin, talking about Austin's private school achievements, his test scores, his plans for Ivy League college. Dylan was a good student at his public school, made friends easily, excelled at sports. But to Blake, that was basic, nothing impressive. Sophie's quiet nature made her practically invisible to him. He'd forget her name sometimes, call her the little one when he bothered acknowledging her at all. The irony is that Austin's a decent kid, despite Blake's parenting, quiet, polite, seems almost embarrassed by his dad's constant bragging. I'd see him playing with Dylan and Sophie at family gatherings, actually being a good older cousin, and wonder how he turned out okay with Blake as his role model. Maybe Nicole balanced it out. She's always been more down-to-earth than her husband, even if she puts up with his nonsense. My parents' dynamic with Blake and me was textbook golden child versus scapegoat. Blake could do no wrong. If he missed a family event, it was because he was so busy and important. When I missed one due to an emergency surgery, it was, "Can't you find someone else to cover?" Blake's expensive lifestyle was aspirational. My more modest choices were playing it too safe. I learned years ago not to engage with his nonsense. Let him have his spotlight, his need to feel superior. I had my career, my family, my own definition of success that didn't require constant validation. But that dynamic, the one where Blake was always right and I was expected to defer, set the stage for what happened. In Blake's world, he was the authority figure and everyone else, including me, fell in line. That included believing him over a 10-year-old child. He's married to Nicole. They've got a 15-year-old son, Austin. Blake treats that kid like he's training him to be the next Supreme Court justice. Everything's about legacy and success and making the right connections. Meanwhile, my approach with Dylan and Sophie is simpler: be good people, work hard, treat others with respect. Radical concept, I know. My relationship with Blake has been strained for years. He's the golden child, the successful lawyer, the one my parents brag about at every opportunity. I'm just the doctor. Solid career, nothing flashy, not worth mentioning unless someone asks directly. That dynamic probably should have warned me about what was coming, but you don't expect your own family to pull what they pulled. The incident happened on a Saturday in June 2023, almost 2 years ago now, but those memories still hit me sometimes when I'm trying to sleep. I wake up thinking about my son scared and confused in a police station, and the rage comes flooding back all over again. That morning started normal enough. We'd planned the visit earlier in the week. My mom had called Tuesday asking if we'd come for lunch Saturday. She wanted to make her famous lasagna. The kids were excited, especially Dylan. He'd been talking all week about playing soccer with Grandpa in the backyard. Sophie was quieter about it, but that was her default mode. She preferred staying inside with books and coloring rather than running around. Saturday morning, I spent an hour at home reviewing patient files and surgical notes. Had a complex case scheduled for Monday, valve replacement on a 62-year-old with severe stenosis, and wanted to be prepared. Rachel made breakfast while the kids watched cartoons. This peaceful domestic scene that felt perfectly ordinary. No warning signs that in a few hours our lives would implode. Rachel drove us to my parents' house. I'm honestly terrible at driving, and she's gotten used to being my chauffeur for family visits. It's not that I can't drive, more that I'm overly cautious to the point of annoyance. 15 miles per hour under the speed limit, excessive brake usage, treating every merge like a military operation. Rachel's patient about it. Takes over whenever we're going somewhere together. The kids don't even question it anymore. Mom drives, Dad navigates and handles the radio. The whole drive over, Dylan was excited, bouncing in his seat, asking if Grandpa had fixed the soccer goal in the backyard. My dad had promised to repair the net last time we visited, and Dylan was holding him to it. Dylan's always been like that, energetic, enthusiastic about everything, trusting that adults will keep their promises. That trust was about to get shattered in the worst way possible. Sophie sat quietly next to him, looking out the window, not saying much. I asked her a few times if she was okay, but she just nodded and gave me these one-word answers. Fine. Yes. Okay. I remember thinking maybe she was tired or just wanted to stay home that day. Sometimes kids get moody about family obligations. If I'd known what was coming, I would have respected that instinct, turned the car around and kept my children safe. Looking back, maybe Sophie sensed something I didn't. Kids have that instinct sometimes, that feeling when something's off, even if they can't articulate why. She'd always been more cautious around Blake's family than Dylan was. Dylan trusted everyone until given a reason not to. Sophie observed first, decided later. She'd sit quietly during family gatherings, watching interactions, reading the room in a way most 6-year-olds don't. There was this one incident months earlier where Blake had snapped at Dylan for running too close to his car, worried about fingerprints on the Tesla. Dylan had been hurt by the harshness, but bounced back within minutes. Sophie, who'd been watching from the porch, refused to go near Blake for the rest of that visit. She'd physically maneuver to keep someone between her and him, this deliberate avoidance that Rachel and I noticed but didn't push her on. Kids are allowed to have preferences about relatives. We arrived around 9 in the morning. Blake's family was already there, him, Nicole, and Austin sitting in the living room. Blake barely looked up from his phone when we walked in, just gave me a brief nod before going back to whatever important email he was reading. The guy was always on his phone, constantly checking messages like he was managing some crisis, even on weekends. Austin was doing the same thing teenagers do, glued to his screen, earbuds in, existing in whatever digital world mattered more than actual family time. Nicole greeted us warmly, though. She's always been the more personable half of that marriage. She hugged Rachel, complimented Sophie's dress, asked about my work. Normal small talk that made the morning feel comfortable. My mom was in the kitchen prepping lunch, even though we wouldn't eat for hours. She's one of those people who starts cooking at dawn for a 1 p.m. meal, needs everything perfect. My dad was outside messing with the grill even though it was too early to start cooking. This was their routine: stay busy, keep moving, make sure everything's just right for family gatherings. The first hour went like always. Dylan ran straight to the backyard like he'd been released from captivity. He grabbed the soccer ball from the garage, started dribbling around the grass, setting up his own game since Grandpa was still fiddling with the grill. I could hear him out there talking to himself, narrating his own soccer match like kids do. Dylan cuts left, beats the defender, shoots, goal. Sophie stayed close to Rachel, sitting quietly on the couch, occasionally coloring in a book she'd brought. She had this whole art supply bag: crayons, markers, coloring books, sketch paper. She'd set up in a corner of the room, creating her own little world while adults talked around her. That was her comfort zone, being present, but not necessarily participating. I talked with my parents about work, the hospital, boring adult stuff. Shared a few stories about recent cases, nothing with patient details, just general anecdotes about the challenges of interventional cardiology. My dad asked questions about the technical side, genuinely interested in the procedures. My mom mostly just listened, occasionally commenting about how stressful my job must be. Blake chimed in occasionally with stories about his latest case, making sure everyone knew how brilliant and connected he was. He was defending some CEO accused of embezzling from his own company, and the way Blake told it, he was single-handedly saving an innocent man from a corrupt justice system. Never mind that the evidence was apparently pretty damning. In Blake's version, he was the hero, outsmarting lazy prosecutors. My mom hung on his every word, asking follow-up questions, expressing amazement at his legal prowess. My dad nodded along, clearly proud. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there thinking about how Blake probably bills $600 an hour to defend people who stole from their employees. But whatever, not my circus. Standard family gathering protocol, everyone playing their assigned roles. Blake the successful attorney, me the stable doctor, my parents the proud grandparents, Rachel the supportive wife, the kids being kids, surface level harmony masking all the underlying dynamics and resentments. Then at 10 a.m., my phone rang. Hospital emergency. My colleague's voice was urgent, serious accident, victim in critical condition, heart trauma, needed immediate surgery, or the patient wouldn't make it through the afternoon. This is the reality of being a cardiologist. Emergencies don't care that it's Saturday or that you're at a family lunch. Someone's heart stops working right, and suddenly your weekend plans don't matter anymore. I stood up immediately. Rachel volunteered to drive me. She knew in an emergency situation, having someone who could actually drive properly would save precious minutes. Before we left, I checked on the kids. Dylan was playing in the backyard, happy as could be. Sophie was still on the couch with her coloring book. I found my mom in the kitchen and asked her to watch the kids, give them lunch when it was time. We'd be back as soon as the surgery was done. She agreed immediately. Why wouldn't she? These were her grandchildren. My parents had watched them dozens of times before without incident. I had zero reason to think this time would be any different. If I could go back to that moment, if I had any idea what was about to happen, I would have grabbed both kids and brought them to the hospital to sit in the waiting room. But you don't know these things. You trust your family to do the absolute bare minimum. Don't harm your grandchildren. Apparently, that was too much to ask. Rachel and I got to the hospital in 20 minutes. The patient was already prepped for surgery, and the situation was worse than initially reported. Severe chest trauma, damaged ventricles, internal bleeding that was filling the pericardial cavity. We spent 3 intense hours in that operating room working to stabilize the heart, repair the damage, get this person's cardiovascular system functioning again. The surgery was successful. By 1 p.m., the patient was stable, moved to ICU with a decent prognosis for recovery. I felt that familiar rush of satisfaction. Another life saved, another family that wouldn't be planning a funeral. Rachel and I grabbed a quick lunch at the hospital cafeteria, then headed back to my parents' house to pick up the kids. We arrived around 2 p.m. The second I walked through the door, I knew something was catastrophically wrong. Dylan wasn't there. His laughter, his constant energy, the sound of him running around, all absent. The living room was dead quiet. Sophie was curled up on the couch, her face pale, looking smaller than her 6 years. My parents sat across from her, looking uncomfortable. Blake's whole family was there, also silent, with this weird tension in the air that made my stomach drop. As soon as Sophie saw Rachel, she jumped off the couch and ran over, grabbing onto Rachel like she was drowning, and Rachel was a life raft. Her little shoulders were shaking. Then she looked up at Rachel and said in this tiny, scared voice, "Mom, the police took Dylan away." Time stopped. I literally couldn't process what she just said. Police? Dylan? My 10-year-old son, who was supposed to be playing in the backyard. The words didn't make sense together, like hearing someone say, "The sun rose at midnight." I spun around to face my parents, then Blake. "Where's Dylan? What the hell does she mean the police took him?" Blake stood up slowly with this infuriating calm expression on his face. He looked me right in the eye and said, "Your son stole my Rolex, worth about $15,000. He wouldn't admit it and give it back. So, I called the cops." The room tilted. I actually had to steady myself against the wall because the rage and confusion hit me so hard I felt dizzy. "You called the police on my 10-year-old son? Are you completely insane?" "He stole from me," Blake said, like he was explaining basic math. "Actions have consequences. The cops will teach him to behave properly." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I turned to my parents, waiting for them to explain that this was some kind of sick joke, that obviously they'd intervened, that obviously they'd stopped this madness. But they just sat there, silent, not meeting my eyes. My mom looked uncomfortable. My dad looked tired. Neither said a word to defend their grandson. "Dad," I said, my voice shaking with barely controlled fury. "You let them take Dylan away? Your grandson? He's 10 years old." My dad finally spoke, his voice quiet. "Blake said Dylan stole the watch. We asked Dylan multiple times if he took it. He kept saying no, but Blake was certain. The police came and took Dylan to the station for questioning." "For questioning?" I repeated the word slowly. "You let police take my child for questioning without calling me first?" "You were in surgery," my mom said weakly. "We didn't want to disturb you during an emergency operation." The logic was so twisted, I actually laughed. "So instead, you let police take my son away and traumatize my daughter watching it happen." Blake jumped in, still with that calm, infuriating tone. "Dylan kept lying about not taking the watch. Sometimes kids need to learn the hard way that lying has consequences." That's when something in me snapped. The protective parent instinct, the rage at this injustice, the absolute betrayal by my own family, it all crystallized into cold, focused fury. I pulled out my phone and called the police station, asking where my son was and demanding to speak with whoever was handling his case. They confirmed Dylan was there being questioned about theft. I told them I was his father, I'd never been notified, and I was coming immediately. Then I turned to Blake and said very clearly, "You just destroyed your own life. I hope that watch was worth it." He actually smirked. "Don't be dramatic. It's just questioning." Rachel and I left immediately, taking Sophie with us. The entire drive to the station, Sophie held Rachel's hand, silent tears running down her face. When I asked her what happened, she said in this small voice, "Dylan didn't take anything. I was with him the whole time. Uncle Blake is lying." At the police station, I found my son sitting in an interrogation room, a 10-year-old child in a room designed to break adult criminals. The room was exactly what you'd picture. Gray walls, metal table bolted to the floor, that two-way mirror everyone knows is there. Dylan looked so small in that chair, dwarfed by the institutional furniture, his eyes red from crying, his whole body language screaming fear and confusion. When he saw me walk in, his face crumpled. He jumped up from the chair and ran over, throwing his arms around me, his little body shaking with sobs he'd been holding in. I could feel how tense he was, wound tight with stress and fear. Kids aren't supposed to feel like this. They're supposed to feel safe, protected, secure. My son felt like a cornered animal. "Dad, I didn't take the watch," he said between sobs, his voice muffled against my shirt. "I promise I didn't. I told them so many times, but nobody believes me. Uncle Blake keeps saying I'm lying, but I'm not, Dad. I swear I'm not." The desperation in his voice broke my heart. This was a kid who'd never been in trouble, never lied about anything significant, suddenly being treated like a criminal. I held him and felt my heart breaking and my rage building simultaneously. "I believe you, buddy. I know you didn't take anything. We're going to fix this." "They kept asking me the same questions over and over," Dylan continued, words tumbling out now that he felt safe. "Where did you hide the watch? Why did you take it? What did you do with it?" I kept saying I didn't take it, but they wouldn't listen. Uncle Blake was there too, telling them I was lying. Why would he say that, Dad? Why would he lie about me? That's what gutted me most. Dylan couldn't comprehend why an adult he trusted would falsely accuse him. His worldview was simple. Adults told the truth. Adults protected kids, family especially. Blake had shattered that fundamental trust. The officer handling the case, some guy named Wright, came over with his report. He was maybe early 40s, looked tired, probably nearing end of shift. The boy maintains he didn't take the watch. We've questioned him for about 90 minutes now. Without evidence or an admission, we can't really proceed further. We'll need to wait for the complainant to provide more proof of theft. 90 minutes, I repeated, keeping my voice level despite wanting to scream. You questioned my 10-year-old son for 90 minutes without his parents present, without even calling us first. Wright had the decency to look uncomfortable, shifting his weight, not quite meeting my eyes. The complaint came from his uncle, a lawyer with good standing in the community. Blake is well known to the department, has worked with us on numerous cases. The grandparents confirmed they had legal guardianship at the time since you were unreachable during surgery. We followed protocol for questioning a minor in custodial supervision. Protocol? The word tasted bitter in my mouth. Did this protocol include checking if the watch was actually missing? Or did you just take my brother's word and drag my child away in handcuffs based on nothing but his accusation? Did you verify that anything was actually stolen before you traumatized a 10-year-old? Wright's expression changed. A flash of something. Guilt, maybe, or realization that they'd screwed up. We operate on good faith when complaints come from attorneys and family members. Blake insisted the watch was taken during the visit and that your son was the only person who could have taken it. He was very convincing in his certainty. I'm sure he was. My brother's very good at being convincing. That's literally his job, but being convincing doesn't make him right. I was struggling to keep my voice calm, professional, when what I wanted was to start breaking things. And the handcuffs, was that protocol too? Wright looked even more uncomfortable. Handcuffs weren't strictly necessary given the child's age and the nonviolent nature of the accusation, but Blake, the uncle, insisted on standard arrest procedure, said it was important the boy understand the seriousness of theft charges, that sometimes kids need to experience consequences to learn. That sealed it. Blake hadn't just called the cops, he'd specifically requested. They traumatize Dylan, handcuff him, treat him like a dangerous criminal, all to teach him a lesson about a theft that never happened. This wasn't about a missing watch. This was about power, about Blake asserting dominance, about putting my kid in his place. I want to file a formal complaint, I said, my voice cold and precise, against my brother for filing a false report and against whoever authorized questioning a minor for 90 minutes without parental notification. I also need copies of everything. The report, the interrogation notes, recordings if you have them, all of it, every word, every document, every piece of evidence that will show exactly what happened here today. Wright nodded slowly, looking like he realized that this situation was about to become a major problem for everyone involved. I can arrange that, but sir, I have to tell you, your brother has significant connections with the department. Multiple officers here have worked with him professionally. The captain considers him a friend. This could get complicated if you pursue it. Let it get complicated, I said, meeting his eyes directly. I don't care if he's best friends with the police chief and the governor. He traumatized my child over something my child didn't do. That's going to have consequences. And if those consequences make some people uncomfortable, well, they should have thought of that before they handcuffed a 10-year-old based solely on the word of his uncle. Wright nodded again, looking resigned. I'll get you those copies. For what it's worth, your son was consistent in his denials throughout the questioning, never wavered, never changed his story, didn't show any of the typical behavioral signs of deception. I noted that in my report. Then why keep questioning him for 90 minutes? Because your brother kept insisting we weren't pressing hard enough, that the boy was a skilled liar, that we needed to push harder to get the truth. He was very persistent. Of course he was. Blake probably enjoyed watching Dylan squirm, enjoyed demonstrating his power, enjoyed the whole performance. We got Dylan and Sophie home. Rachel ordered pizza because cooking was the last thing on anyone's mind. Dylan sat on the couch between us, still shaking occasionally, looking smaller than he should. Sophie sat on Rachel's other side, holding her mom's hand. Both kids were traumatized by different aspects of the same nightmare. That night, after the kids were finally asleep, Rachel and I sat in our bedroom and planned our next move. I called a friend from medical school who'd gone into medical malpractice law, asked for a referral to someone who handled false accusations and police misconduct. It gave me a name, Jennifer Walsh, attorney who specialized in exactly this kind of case. Monday morning, I took a personal day and went to see Walsh, brought all the police documents, explained the entire situation, held nothing back about Blake's connections or my parents' complicity. She listened to everything, took notes, and then sat back with this expression I couldn't quite read. This is bad, she said finally, but it's also incredibly actionable. Your brother filed a false police report. The officer violated procedure by not notifying you immediately when your minor child was taken into custody. And there's the question of the watch itself. Has your brother even proven it's actually missing? No idea, I admitted. For all I know, he put it somewhere and forgot, or he's lying entirely to make a point. Then we start there, Walsh said. We demand proof the watch was stolen. We demand the interrogation records and recordings. We document everything that was done to your son and build a case not just against your brother, but against the department for how they handled this. Your brother's connections might have gotten him this far, but they won't protect him from documented misconduct. Over the next week, Walsh filed motions and demands. The police department was forced to turn over all records of Dylan's interrogation. We got recordings of the whole thing, 90 minutes of my scared child insisting he didn't take the watch while officers and Blake pressed him to confess. It was one of the hardest things I've ever listened to, hearing Dylan's voice getting smaller and more frightened as the questioning continued. The recording also captured Blake coaching the officers on how to question Dylan, which questions to ask, how to pressure him. An attorney using his knowledge of interrogation tactics against his own nephew. That recording alone was enough to turn my stomach. Walsh also subpoenaed Blake's financial records and phone logs, looking for proof that the watch even existed and was actually missing. Turned out Blake had filed an insurance claim for the watch 6 months earlier, claiming it was damaged beyond repair. He'd been paid out $14,000 by his insurance company. The watch he claimed Dylan stole either didn't exist anymore, or Blake was committing insurance fraud on top of filing a false police report. When Walsh presented this evidence to the district attorney, they opened an investigation immediately. Blake's connections suddenly didn't matter so much when he was potentially facing multiple felony charges. The DA's office loved cases involving corrupt lawyers, made for good press, and helped clean up the legal profession's reputation. While this was happening, my parents started calling. First, my mom crying, asking why I was escalating things unnecessarily. Then my dad using his stern voice, telling me I was tearing the family apart over a misunderstanding. Blake called too, alternating between threatening me with legal action and trying to act like we could work this out between us. I blocked them all. Every number, every email address, every possible way they had to contact me. Rachel did the same. We were done being the family members who swallowed mistreatment in the name of keeping the peace. My parents showed up at our house one evening, 3 weeks after the incident. I saw them through the window. They had gift bags, probably thinking they could smooth this over with presents for the kids. I didn't even open the door. I yelled through it, "Leave now or I'm calling the cops." "Carter, please," my mom called back. "We need to talk about this like adults." "Adults don't let their grandchildren get arrested over lies," I replied. "Adults don't side with a liar over the victim. Get off my property." My dad tried next, "Son, Blake made a mistake. Can't we move past this? He's your brother." That's what pushed me over the edge. He stopped being my brother when he handcuffed my son. "You stopped being my parents when you let it happen. This isn't a mistake. This was a choice. All of you made choices. Now you get to live with the consequences." They left eventually, but not before I called 911 and reported them for trespassing and attempted witness intimidation. The police documented it, added it to the growing case file. Every action they took to try to make this go away just dug their hole deeper. The legal process moved forward. Dylan was examined by a child psychologist who documented the trauma from his interrogation: anxiety, nightmares, fear of police, trust issues. The report was damning, painting a clear picture of how this incident had damaged a child who'd done nothing wrong. Blake was charged with filing a false police report and attempted insurance fraud. Wright, the officer who'd conducted the interrogation, was charged with violating procedure regarding minors and constitutional rights violations. My parents weren't criminally charged, but I filed for a permanent restraining order against them, citing emotional distress to my children and their role in enabling the false accusation. Blake tried to use his connections to make it all disappear. He called in favors, reached out to colleagues, tried to pressure the DA's office to drop the charges, but the evidence was too solid, the case too public. Local news had picked up the story. Prominent attorney accused of filing false report against nephew. His reputation was crumbling in real time. The trial for Wright came first. With all the evidence Walsh had compiled, it was brutal. The recording of Dylan's interrogation was played in court. The judge and jury heard my 10-year-old son's voice, scared and confused, insisting he didn't take the watch, while Wright and Blake pressed him to confess to something he didn't do. Wright tried to defend himself, claiming he followed protocol and had no reason to doubt Blake's story. But the violations were clear: failure to immediately notify parents, conducting an extended interrogation of a minor without counsel or parental presence, allowing a civilian, Blake, to coach the interrogation. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Wright was sentenced to 3 years in prison, fired from the police force, and permanently barred from law enforcement. He was also ordered to pay Dylan $1.5 million in damages. I watched him cry in court when the sentence was read, his career and life destroyed by his own choices. Blake's trial was next, and if Wright's trial was brutal, Blake's was devastating. The evidence of the insurance claim combined with the false police report painted a picture of a man who'd either committed fraud or falsely accused a child to cover up his own mistake. The recording of him coaching Wright during Dylan's interrogation showed calculated cruelty toward his own nephew. Blake's lawyer tried everything: character witnesses talking about his community service, his successful law practice, his family. But none of that mattered against the recording of Dylan crying while Blake pressured officers to break him. The jury saw a powerful man using his position and connections to traumatize a child, and they weren't having it. Guilty on both charges, 4 years in prison, $500,000 in damages to Dylan, and permanent disbarment. His law firm shut down within a week of the verdict. All those connections he'd bragged about for years vanished overnight. Turns out, when you're a disbarred attorney facing prison time, your professional network decides they never really knew you that well. I watched Blake break down in court when the disbarment was announced. All those years building his practice, his reputation, his network, gone. Nicole sat in the back row looking devastated, probably calculating how to support Austin and herself with Blake in prison and no income. Part of me felt bad for her and Austin. They hadn't done anything wrong, but Blake had made his choices and his family would have to live with the consequences alongside him. My parents weren't criminally prosecuted, but the restraining order was granted. Permanent restriction, preventing them from coming within 500 feet of me, Rachel, Dylan, or Sophie. No contact in any form. The judge was clear in his ruling. Their failure to protect their grandson and their subsequent attempts to intimidate us into dropping charges showed they posed a continued threat to my family's well-being. My mom cried in court when the order was read. My dad sat there looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. I felt nothing. Maybe that makes me cold, but they'd chosen Blake over Dylan. They'd watched police take their 10-year-old grandson away and done nothing to stop it. That's not something you forgive just because they regret it now. After the trials, life slowly returned to normal. Dylan had some rough months, nightmares about police, anxiety when he saw officers in public, trust issues that required working through with a counselor. But kids are resilient. With time and support, he healed. The nightmares faded. His smile came back. He joined his school soccer team and became one of their best players. Sophie came out of her shell more after we cut contact with my parents and Blake. Turns out she'd always felt uncomfortable around them but couldn't articulate why. Kids sense things sometimes that adults miss. She's 8 now, more confident, actually talks and laughs during family dinners instead of sitting quietly. Removing the toxic family members gave her space to be herself. Rachel held our family together through all of it. She was the steady presence when I was consumed with rage and legal proceedings. She kept Dylan and Sophie's routine stable, made sure they felt safe and loved despite the chaos. I don't know what I did to deserve a partner like her, but I'm grateful every day. 2 years later, we're in a good place. Dylan's 12 now, thriving in school, star player on his soccer team. When I watch him play, I sometimes remember that scared 10-year-old in the police station and feel grateful he overcame it. Sophie's 8, still quieter than her brother, but genuinely happy. She hasn't mentioned her grandparents once in 2 years, and I don't bring them up. As for my parents and Blake, I've blocked every form of contact. Other family members occasionally reach out suggesting I should forgive and reconnect. Every time I either hang up or walk away, there's nothing to discuss. Some things can't be forgiven. When you let police handcuff and traumatize your 10-year-old grandson over a lie, you don't get to come back from that. Blake's serving his sentence, and from what I hear through the grapevine, prison hasn't been kind to an ex-lawyer. Wright's in a different facility, probably having an equally rough time as a former cop. Their choices destroyed their lives, and I don't lose sleep over it. My parents tried to show up at Dylan's school once, apparently thinking they could see him during recess. The school had been given copies of the restraining order and called me immediately. I called the police. They showed up and documented the violation. My parents haven't tried again since. Eventually they'll understand that the relationship is over. They made their choice. They live with it.